Good morning. Good morning. Can you hear me? Wonderful. So, good morning to those who are in one side of the Atlantic. Good afternoon to those who are in the other side of the Atlantic. It's a great joy to start our first webinar at last of the Jean Monnet Network on Atlantic Studies number 2. I would like, before anything, to thank Leonardo and Jade. Both they were the heart and the liver of the seminar. I'm not going to try to identify who was the heart or who was the liver, but they were crucial for our making this seminar. So thank you very much, Leonardo. Thank you very much, Jade. And I hope that this is the beginning of a very interesting and lively series. I don't have much to say, as you know that I always repeat the 3 or 4 main points about the project. So allow me to repeat one of them, which is about our site. Allow me to remind you that our site is the soul. I've mentioned hearts and livers. Now I mentioned the soul. Our site is the soul of the project. So please, everybody, every node of the network, because the network is its 6 nodes, every node of the network must supply our the site with information, with papers, with events. Please, if we don't do this, our project will be a flop. Despite all the webinars, all the presential meetings, we hope we start to implement next year. So please feed the website. I look at the website from time to time, and I see that the thematic files, which are supposed to host or to guard papers and works by members of the network, they continue to be empty. So please, for instance, during this whole seminar, we are going to present things which have been better elaborated, things which are work in progress. No problem. We are a working group. So I urge everybody to send something to our site. Eduardo is going, for instance, to put forward his ideas on the question of the vaccine. He's still elaborating. They are going to become much better, but he has something for discussion. So write a sort of working preliminary paper. My dear Mario is working on this comprehensive investment partnership, which is very, very important. I was so glad to see that Mario was going to discuss this. I think it's a crucial theme. So if you have something written, even if it is preliminary, send to the site. The same thing with the discussants, my dear Mark, Abdelaziz. So if you have something, well, an idea popped up, you have 2 or 3 pages, please do send to the site. And the same applies to all the other 2 sessions. We need to make a lively site, a site where everybody will go and will have up-to-date information, lively discussions, ideas. That's why we get money from the Commission. The Commission wants discussion, wants debate, wants new ideas. That's what I had to say regarding the project. Regarding the meeting, we have this very simple. I told Leonardo many times. Leonardo had wonderful ideas. If I would leave him, he would make a much better meeting, but much more ambitious. I decided to be careful and more conservative. So it's a very simple meeting. We get together people from our 3 thematic areas. We start a discussion, okay? And that's what we are going to have. We have 2 today. We have a 3rd one tomorrow. And then we have a wrap-up session, which I would like to be, that it will be a kind of brainstorm. So you just criticize, you say, well, we found the seminar very boring, very bad. The speakers They're wonderful people, lovely, but I didn't like any paper at all. My idea is that tomorrow we have a lively, open discussion and learn how to prepare ourselves to the next seminar, please. Very unfortunately, I'm not sure whether I'll be able to be the whole period tomorrow. I'll be very likely in the beginning, and I'll try to be the whole session and lead the wrap up. If I'm not able to do this, Leonardo will replace me. It's a better replacement than the original, and Leonardo will conduct the wrap up. But please do participate in the wrap up and do criticize, give us your ideas, especially for the next webinar. So that's what I had to say. I'm very glad that we managed to make it. Congratulations to everybody. Thank you very much to the presenters and the discussants in all sessions. I know very well that the time is very unfortunate. Everybody's worried with 100 things. We have this bloody COVID in every country, in all the 6 countries in our webinar. We are suffering from this pandemic. So I know times are very hard. So I think that we made a great job in managing to have all these people. So without further delay and gaining already 5 minutes, I shall start our first session, which is about our thematic area. I like to call it trans-border economic flows. Instead, first of all, it's a more modern title. Instead of talking about trade, because trade is one leg of a big body, the body of trans-border economic flows, or trade and investment, which at least then our body will have 2 legs, okay? But there is more to that. Of course, maybe, I don't know, 85% or 95% of the presentations will be about either trade or investment. But I want to leave open this larger gate of transborder economic flows. There are many things, even migration, for instance. You can look at migration from a social viewpoint, from a legal viewpoint, from a geostrategic viewpoint, but also you can look at migration from a sheer economic viewpoint. So our thematic area is transborder economic flows. We have 3 sets of ideas, which will be presented by Onorevole Professor and my great friend Mario Telò from Université Libre de Bruxelles, and also from Luis in La Bella Roma. Then I will present a few ideas about the WTO, and then our great friend Eduardo Soler from beautiful Barcelona and from our old friends from CEDOB will set forward his ideas on a working paper about the vaccine. Eduardo is a very serious scientist, so he said, first, no, I don't think that my paper is ready yet. Maybe I should be a discussion. But I told him, Edward, the ideas about the theme of the vaccine, the subject of vaccines is so hot, it's so important that it will be a great contribution that you you put forward your ideas, even if they are in a preliminary state. So we have 3 presenters, we have 2 discussants, our dear and old a member of the old guard of the Jean Monnet Network, Mark Aspinwall, who's there. He brought one assistant. Maybe the assistant will say a few words after his comments. He brought a very nice assistant. Here is the assistant, very nice one. And our dear friends from Morocco, great friends from the now with this wonderful name, the Policy Center for the New South. They are, as always, contributing densely with our to our meetings and to our events. Thank you very much, my dear Abdelaziz. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you, and a great hug A very warm regards to all the people in the Policy Center in our dear Morocco. So I think we have everybody up, and I must say, otherwise I'll be fired by my institution, that all the words, all the opinions, all the statements presented during this whole event are of the entire responsibility of the speakers. FGV is not committed, has no responsibility at all, is not for or against any of the ideas presented, okay? So the sole responsibility of everything that's going to be presented and discussed in the seminar belongs to us, the speakers, the discussants. Okay, this is the formal statement that our foundation obliges us correctly to state. Okay, the foundation is an open think tank, has no sides, no political parties, no affiliations. And this is the token of our independence, is that all ideas are allowed, but everybody who states an idea is responsible for his own idea. So without further ado, I pass the floor to my dear friends, Mario Teló. Also, I just received the last reminder that there's also a question of the right of the image. Okay, so apparently, well, once you participate, your image can be circulated because you are going to, this event will be part of the foundation's YouTube. So it is implicit that you allow your beautiful looks to appear in this YouTube, and this YouTube is open. Okay, so anybody afterwards will enjoy your image, your ideas, and your presentation. Okay. So, caro Mario, thank you very, very, very much for coming. We are looking forward your ideas on the comprehensive investment partnership.
Okay.
Please, you do present the right title. I know that you are very careful with these things. And theoretically, you have 15 minutes. The floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you so much. First, I spend 30 seconds to say that I congratulate very much the Fundação Getulio Vargas, in particular Renato Flores, and Leonardo, its staff, Jad and the others, Vanessa and the others, because you are able to keep our network alive in spite of the difficult circumstances and the big challenges we have in this pandemic. Thank you so much. I will take part to this important meeting from Brussels. From raining Brussels, more raining than usually. As every day I bike from my house to the office, but this time, unfortunately, halfway it started raining, so I'm much more wet than usually today. So, in spite of that, now I'm ready to present a PowerPoint, an original PowerPoint I prepared for this particular meeting. A new PowerPoint, interdisciplinary, because the spirit of the network is interdisciplinary. My approach is more international political economy. However, I'm not an economist. I'm as background a political scientist. And I would like to draw your attention on this new event. That is the arrangement signed by the top authorities of the European Union and China, Xi Jinping, on 30 December 2020. And this is after 7 years of negotiation. So this is the reason why I think it deserves attention for its implications, particularly geopolitical implications. I will show a PowerPoint here. Can you see?
Yes.
Can you see my PowerPoint?
Yes, Mario. Yes.
Okay, very well. So the name of this arrangement is a Comprehensive Agreement on Investment and I had the subtitle, "Is bilateralism a leverage for a new multilateralism?" This is a question which will be a kind of thread in my presentation. But first of all, since we are in a interdisciplinary context, academic context, I would like to start by a definition of multilateralism, because maybe it can be useful. What do we mean by multilateralism? I mean, it's an historical phenomenon in my research, including three epochs. The first one in the 19th century, you remember the postal union, the telegraph union, and so on, and continued after 44-45 under United States hegemony, United Nations and Bretton Woods institutions. And then the question is whether it's true what I'm saying, that a new epoch of multilateralism is now open because of the legitimacy and efficiency crisis of the previous multilateral framework. And the new one will certainly be post-hegemonic, no one single power dominating the multilateral framework, pluralist, more comprehensive than about mere trade, and based on demands of civil society participation. This is a general introduction. First challenge for our interdisciplinary network is to define the relation between multilateralism and regionalism, or interregionalism. I remember the old debate, which was absolutely important, between Bhagwati, Columbia University, and Summers, Harvard University in 92. Is regionalism, is in French, is regionalism an obstacle to multilateralism, as Bhagwati said in his famous article of 92? A situation in which several different countries or organizations work together to achieve something or deal with a problem is the Dictionary of Cambridge for multilateralism. And the answer by Bhagwati was very negative about the incompatibility between regionalism and multilateralism, while Larry Summers was much more constructive and positive about that. This is The Economist. Regarding the political scientists, they are not so rigid as Bhagwati is, because Robert Cohen, president of the American Society for Political Science, has written that the practice of coordinating national policies in groups of 3 or more states is enough for defining a framework as multilateral. 3 or more states. You don't need all the members of the WTO or the United Nations. And Draghi goes in the same directions by saying that an institutional multilateralism is an institutional form which coordinates relations among 3 or more states based on generalized principle of conduct, which specified appropriate conduct for a class of actions without regard to particularistic interest of the parties and or strategic exigencies that may exist in any occurrence. My definition is multilateralism defines the unidimensional or multidimensional. It's not only about trade. Relations among more than 2 interdependent countries or between regions, Mercosur and European Union, for example, setting common rules and procedures based on reciprocity with the aim of addressing common interests and objectives at regional, interregional, and global level. So in my definition, I include all the level, a multi-layered form of global governance, multi-level or multi-layered. This is an introduction. What about the European Union trade policy? You know very well, I don't need to spend time. Since 1957, the European Union acts in the trade policy as a state, because it's an exclusive competence of the European Union, at the time European Community, since 1957. This means that the community method is of application Commission has the monopoly of initiative and of the management of the negotiation for the 27. The Council voted by majority, qualified majority voting. The Parliament has the power of co-decision, confirmed and strengthened by the Lisbon Treaty, and the Court of Justice may intervene in case of violations. Well, after the Lisbon Treaty 2007, what was stressed furthermore was that the European Union, by every external relations, from trade to cooperation with developing countries, foreign policy, and so on, must follow the rules of a comprehensive approach to external relations. Comprehensive means coherent, consistent, and global. This idea of a coherence, horizontal and vertical coherence between internal and external policy, is very deeply rooted in this treaty provision. And after the Lisbon Treaty, we had two papers quite consistent with this inspiration. The Trade Commissioner Malmström paper of 2015 is a trade strategy, trade for all, and the High Representative for Foreign Policy Mogherini paper 2016, Global Europe. So it's quite consistent, this development. Well, regarding the practice, China is overtaking the United States as main trade partner of the European Union. In the last year, this tendency was even stronger, whereas China was already 20% in 2018 and only 11% is exports. But now, even in the exports is increasing so much that is overcoming the United States. Well, try to focus on the development of the global, because this is directly affecting our research. We have a global shift from Atlantic to Pacific of the global economy center. China is the first economy by parity purchasing power. Already, you see here in this figure that China and the forecast is even stronger in this direction. The blue is China, the red is the European Union, and the pink is the United States. You see how big is the growth of the Chinese economy, and it's the first time in the history that we have as the first economy, an economy based on an authoritarian regime. That is a challenge for all of us. This also in terms of traditional measurement, this is true, but will be clear within a few years. Whereas in PPP terms is already like that. The relevance of China as a market is extremely clear by this figure. China is the red one, and the United States is the blue. You see, for every member state, China, with the exception of Mexico and Canada, China is becoming the number one trade partners. However, United States remains the single superpower in terms of defense budget. So the idea is that we are going toward a bipolar world. It's quite rhetoric, because in terms of rearmament, China remains 6 times less every year than United States as the defense budget. As you can see here, China is the blue and United States is the orange. However, in spite of this shift toward the Pacific, that transatlantic relation remains a priority for the European Union. You see, the European Union commitment to the transatlantic market remains relevant. Agreement with Canada in 2016. With United States, the TTIP has been frozen by Trump, but it's not because of the European Union, and the agreement with Mexico in 2018. And I give much importance to the arrangement European Union Mercosur 2019. The agreement with Mercosur is very important because it's the first one between two custom unions after 2 decades of negotiations. I remember that is not just a free trade arrangement, it's a regulatory arrangement. Very important, includes topics beyond the trade cooperation such as democratization, human rights, ILO convention, environment, capacity building mechanism such as technical assistance in training, computer networks, education have been included in the agreement. Transparency, conflict settling mechanism based on arbitration panels. It is establishment a profound multidimensional interregional partnership with political and cultural implications for both, and will have maybe, hopefully, an impact on regional cooperation because it will strengthen Mercosur in its competition with the Pacific Alliance. And we could take some time to discuss about the future of the competing regionalism in South America, and which is the impact of the interregional relations with the other part of the world on regionalism in South America. Is it a geopolitical signal? Yes, because in the period of trade wars and the WTO declining role, a new regulatory system emerged between Europe and Mercosur, despite the setbacks in the Trump administration approach toward protectionism. Which will be the Biden approach? Nobody knows for the moment. However, caveats for the EU-Mercosur are important because there are very strong protectionist obstacles and resistance within both blocs. And this may affect the internal ratification. I mentioned some of the examples and the causes of possible difficulties and challenges by ratification. The question of environment is crucial for the European public opinion, not only green but also Catholic. Notably, the European Union must gain unanimous support in the Council in order to ratify the agreement, and furthermore, the new powers of the European Parliament after the Lisbon Treaty will provide the Parliament with the final word. A by solution in case of difficulties may be unpacking the agreement, for instance, isolating the non-direct investments, but this is a question open. However, what I wanted to say is that the initiative of Europe toward China is not to be seen as an isolated, but is balanced by a strong commitment in the Atlantic. And I mentioned Canada and Mercosur and Mexico as 3 very relevant arrangements. Trump in Asia Pacific left a strategic vacuum with his withdrawal from the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, signed in 2015 by Obama. TPP, however, continues, which is astonishing as a bad surprise for Trump that Japan decided to go on with Australia and the other partners, Korea and so on, by the comprehensive progressive TPP. And the question is whether the withdrawal of the United States will weaken the Alianza do Pacifico, expanding beyond, which was expanding beyond Mexico, Peru, and Chile to other countries, but without any support from the United States during the Trump presidency. So I don't know which will be the impact of the CPTPP and the withdrawal of the United States on the Alianza do Pacifico. That is a crucial question in our transatlantic framework. And I come to China. Which was the reaction of China to the CPTPP? Reviving the RCEP, which was signed on 15 November 2020. Something new is something extremely relevant because it represents 30% of the global GDP. It represents two continents, Oceania and Asia, so I qualify as an interregional relation. In this context, you must understand why the European Union decided to accelerate its Asia Pacific strategy. Without taking into account these facts, it's difficult to understand. Why in investments? Why the comprehensive agreement on investments signed very recently? But FTA with China is not mature because of so different standards in trade. However, investments are very relevant in a relation between China and European Union because the European Union investment in China, which were booming in the previous decade, are declining since 2015. You see, from $22,500 billion down to 7,500 in 2017. Why? Because the European investors are not happy with the access to the market, are not happy with the obligation to joint ventures, to transfer of technologies, and so on. While the Chinese investment in the European Union are booming. Sorry, okay. While the China investment in the European Union are booming, they are making concern by many states like France, and I will say why. Why achieve negotiation in COVID times in this particular moment? Why in this particular moment? Because China is growing by 2.3 in 2020, by 7.3 in 2021, while the European Union has had a recession by 7% in 2020 because of the COVID, and will have probably, hopefully, an increase, but is not sure, by 4% in 2021. We have now this very important recovery plan, but is not probably enough to get 4%. Why achieve it before the Biden administration start? Was signed on 30 December. Why? Because the Biden administration, like the Trump administration, dislikes this European Union policy. And the security advisor of Biden, Jackie Sullivan, commented the arrangement of 30 December is a naive arrangement, making a present to China. According to him, European Union must ask the United States for green light before signing. But European Union proved an evidence of strategic autonomy on this regard. So what is this Sky with China? 7 years negotiation. The accord was signed by the authorities of both sides, has to be still translated in 27 languages and in Mandarin, and it will take 1 year time for this legal process. Offensive side for European Union is to stop the previous obstacles to market access in China, obligation of joint venture, opening back, stopping the obligation of joint venture, opening up various crucial sectors of the Chinese economy, the maritime and air transport, car sector, health sector, equipments, service, digital sector, finance sector, is extremely comprehensive. It's not only a liberalizing arrangement, it is a regulatory arrangement like the one with Mercosur, including a level playing field. The defensive side is stopping the Chinese shopping of some of the best European strategic companies by a system of scrutiny of the Chinese investment in Europe. Very sensitive issue.
2 minutes, please.
Yes,
Okay.
very sensitive issue is the Sustainable Development Chapter. concession to China, of China to the European Union, was remembering the COP21 treaty implementation, and China rated this because it's quite unusual from a communist country to reach, after negotiation, the commitment to sustain the endeavors for ILO Convention ratification, stopping forced labor, including in the western area of China, and including freedom of association of workers. It's quite unusual with communist country. So is this treaty to be interpreted as isolated? No. It's part of a general strategy of European Union surrounding China, because there is a negotiation now with ASEAN, and all the countries of ASEAN +3 and ASEAN +6, including the RCEP, are concerned by European Union initiative of trade policy. The European Union trade policy may have problems because it's such a comprehensive agenda, is time consuming, takes time. And secondly, there is the big problem of the investor state dispute settlement mechanism, which were accepted by Mercosur, by Canada, and maybe by China to some extent. And the ratification is a challenge. I come to the first question, and I conclude by that. Is CAI compatible with multilateralism, or is it against it? In my opinion, is not a matter of bilateralism. Bilateralism is an arrangement between, UK and Brazil. This is bilateral. But an arrangement between, including a regional organization, is interregional, according to political scientist literature. And I see the conclusion of my research is that you have here all the different arrangements, that you have at least three levels of where this interregional relation between European Union, Mercosur, and European Union, China, is supporting a new multilateral arrangement, which may be reviving, a leverage for reviving WTO. Sustainable Development Chapter includes ILO conventions. This is multilateral. Sustainable Development Chapter includes the COP21 and COP26 explicitly. And conflict settlement mechanism are suggestions which are very worthy for the UNICITRAL negotiation in WTO. Of course, Europe needs variable coalition. For some issues, United States may be a partner. For instance, reforming the WTO, and Renato Flores will talk about that. But for other issues, we absolutely need China. Containing China is not feasible because of the interdependence of supply chains, of multilateral convergence, and the implication of China in many regional and interregional and global multilateral sets. Conclusion number one: bilateralism is a leverage for multilateralism. Yes, provided that it is rather interregional, and secondly, that some multilateral issues are included in the arrangement. I have no time to go into detail, but my conclusion is positive, provided. Conclusion number two: if we want to contain negative consequences of the economic power shift to Asia Pacific, there are three complementary ways. One, broad coalition for WTO, a United Nations reform. Number two, reforming and deepen the trade and investment transatlantic treaties, Mercosur and TTIP. Third, deepening regional integration in both South America and European Union. And this reviving Mercosur is dynamic alternative to the Pacific Alliance, and European Union succeeding by recovery plan. So I conclude by saying I use better open strategic autonomy because this gives the example that autonomy doesn't mean at all protectionism. This is a new slogan in the European Union. Strategic autonomy, I very much emphasize the word open. Research is going on. We have a new book where Renato Flores is also one of the authors. Is this one, Toward a New Multilateralism, by Routledge, is coming in this month. And the second, the book on the reforming multilateralism in post-COVID time, I have edited last month for FEPS. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mario. As usual, it's a very informative presentation, and I think everybody learned a lot. I learned a lot, and I'm enjoying many of your remarks. I don't know if we have the time for a full discussion, but thank you very much. I enjoyed it a lot, and I'm two remarks. I see in your screen at the right the beautiful Brussels rain by your window, and I also noticed that you have a picture of Goethe in your bureau.
Yes,
So you,
Goethe and Machiavelli, both.
That's Goethe. Well, oh, Goethe only appears here. You should then put Machiavelli. Okay, I enjoyed it very much to see that it's your German side. Okay, grazie tantissimo, Mario. Really, really, I enjoyed a lot. Very good. I think now the ball is on my side, and I'll try to be short so that we can gain a few 5 minutes, but we haven't lost anything. I think that we all gained quite a lot with your presentation. Well, I want to discuss a bit the future of the WTO. So this is a very broad discussion, and I want to present a few basic ideas on this topic. We saw that Mario, for instance, touched briefly on the WTO. In the end, I'm going to mention one of his proposals by the end of his talk. But my talk will be very structural. I'll try to outline a framework of what are the main issues regarding the future of the WTO. First of all, I have a kind of groundwork assumption. My groundwork assumption is that there is a general agreement that we need a WTO, a kind of international organization that will keep, let us say, a set of basic rules for managing, for controlling international trade. So my point of departure is that there is a general agreement on this. Given this, I have three main statements about what are the big problems regarding the WTO. There are other problems, but I think that we must face anyone who's going to try to change, to improve the WTO or even reformulate it drastically, which in my view is not out of the table. It's an important option. I think that there are three main points which are the fundamental ones. The first is the following, and maybe it's the more difficult in my whole presentation. The first is that WTO became old. I think the WTO became old, and became old from a very basic standpoint, which is the following. GATT and WTO, which succeeded GATT, they were based on the idea of free trade. So WTO worked based on a single lighthouse. The goal, the judge, the final decision was always towards free trade. I think there was quite a lot of hypocrisy in this, but well, it worked because you need to have a guiding principle. So the guiding principle was free trade, the foundation now principle, which also existed in God. But nowadays, if you look at our reality, free trade as an absolute truth doesn't apply anymore. And I think that this can get the agreement of most people. So we have to reconcile the idea of free trade, which still is important as a guiding principle, with another purpose, which is creating labor. There is an urgent need in the whole planet to generate labor, to create labor. In the past, and I did a lot of evaluations for the WTO, when you rearrange it and you suggest a new policy, it was evident that sectors would suffer. There would be unemployment. Then we had this magic word, was trade adjustment. Okay, you implement this policy, and attention, don't forget to outline a set of trade adjustment measures. This is not enough anymore. Nobody's going to accept this anymore because employment is a main goal. If we don't look at this, we'll be outside our times, our post-COVID times, in which we're going to have to face, if you are an optimist, you say an uneven recovery. If you are a pessimist, you say an uneven recession. But we're going to face hard economic times. So during these hard economic times, with fiscal deficits, Europeans, my dear Mario, they are running, they are preparing, they are opening the door to an amazingly huge fiscal deficit. My country also, and many other countries, the US also. But fiscal deficit in the US, we know it's macroeconomically, it's a bit different. But anyhow, with the hard economic times we are going to face, with the increasing percolation of automation, which continues percolating through all manufacturing sectors, and an atmosphere of social unrest, social conflict everywhere, it's impossible to disregard trade. So the new WTO will need to take into account, let us say, a dose of free trade, but must have much more concern regarding labor. And also, thirdly, has to combine this with increased national security concerns. The COVID showed very well that for the good and the bad, for the better and the worst, national security clauses have been heavily used during this time of the pandemic. And they are here to stay because catastrophes and pandemics will come around much more frequently with all the present situation in the world. So a new WTO, not this old one, will need to reconcile free trade with a great, much bigger concern on labor and how to accommodate increased, heightened national security concerns without slipping into protectionism. This is the first point. Second point, the US was very vocal during Trump times against the understanding on dispute settlement and the appellate body. And the US is a problematic country because whatever it says, you either have people for or against. It's very difficult to find people with a balanced view on the US. So they say, well, this is just in the interest of the US. They're wrong. Oh, no, no, they're fully right. We have to fight against this bloody Chinese. So you have 0 or 1. But actually, in this case, there was a lot of truth as regards the US criticism on the understanding of dispute settlement, particularly the role of the appellate body. I like to use the following image for the status quo. The WTO became a kind of schizophrenic organization with a Dr. Jekyll enforcing and guaranteeing trade rules which are consolidated in treaties, treaties which are for long periods and very tiresomely negotiated. So one side of the institution, which was the Dr. Jekyll side, was enforcing what had been agreed in the previous rounds and in negotiations. So they were valid, okay? But another side of the negotiation, of the institution, in the same institution, there was a young Mr. Hyde with a law degree creating a superstructure of rules based on the appellate body decisions and on decisions and statements by lawyers, very qualified people as lawyers, but not all of them specialists in trade theory. This is very serious because there was a tremendous bias towards the legal aspects, forgetting the trade. As Mario said in the beginning, he said, well, I'm international political economist or international political science. So trade has many dimensions, not only the legal dimension. And the appellate body, in a set of a half a dozen judges, were creating another superstructure, which many times was quite far away from the negotiated rules during the rounds. So this criticism is right. And one has to come back, rethink the features of the understanding on dispute settlement and the appellate body. Otherwise, the institution won't be credible. The third big problem regards two things, two problems, specific problems. Of course, you could say, well, that could be, but Renato, we can tell you 10 more problems. Yes, indeed, I do agree. But I've made a choice of the two key problems, and both are related to this new kid in the block who is active everywhere. Who is this new kid? Are the big enterprises, the big transnationals. I would like drawing from a G20 language, the enterprises which are too big to regulate. The great example, the five sisters of the digital realm. So we have now enterprises which are completely outside the law. European Union is fighting, even the US is fighting with them. And they play a major role in international trade. So they have two dimensions which must be addressed. The first one is the state-owned enterprises, which, well, the US usually says, well, it's impossible. China doesn't play fair because all the big and all the competitive enterprises, they are state-owned. Yes and no, but this must be addressed. The WTO must get deeper into these new kids on the block, have a definition of an enterprise, a better definition of what is a state-owned enterprise. And the second dimension of the enterprise problem is the question of planetary oligopolies. Now we deal with planetary oligopolies who, if we allow, they are going to rule the world. I don't know if maybe this will be a better world. I don't know. But they are very powerful, and there must be a restraining regulation. One must be very wise, but regulating, controlling, addressing this planetary oligopoly. So this is my third main point. You could add intellectual property rights. They became old-fashioned. They must change. Digital trade is an enormous void at present in the organization. But I would like to stress the question of the enterprise, those too big to regulate. Well, these are the 3 points. How to implement or induce change? We get down to more practical concerns. How to do this? Well, I think this is going to be mission impossible, because as the new DG, I'm going to say a few words about her, has explicitly said, she's supposed to run the organization during very hard times, where protectionist measures, protectionist pressures will continue and increase. We are still digesting protectionist measures imposed during the 2008 and 2009 financial crisis. People forget this. Many of the protectionist measures which were implemented at that time haven't managed at all. And let's not be silly. A lot of new ones will come up. So how to cope with this? She will have to manage the organization to ensure that trade, that open trade, works daily, at the same time that there will be an enormous protectionist pressure and criticism on the organization. And during this, she's supposed to guide, to lead a hugely transforming change in the organization, a change that must be encompassing. Otherwise, it won't work. It won't be credible. So this is mission impossible. I don't know how to reconcile this. And all this in an environment where, first, negotiating and planning time, I don't even go to will. I mean, time will be scarce. People will be worried. The number of demands will be so big that many people get confused. They won't even know what to address, how to set priorities during this time. So negotiating and planning time will be scarce. And secondly, very importantly, I don't know whether Edward is going to address this topic in his talk, cooperation will be fragile and goal-oriented. In this case, the past tells us about the future. Look at how corporations, state of cooperation during the pandemic, only not a dreamer, but a blind person would think that this is going to change when the pandemic will be under control. So I think that the WTO runs the danger of, in the best hypothesis, of surgical changes, addressing a few key problems while trying to manage the daily work, the daily obligations. And thus, I think, is going to be a disaster, because the organization needs a drastic revamping, as well as the WHO, as well as the Security Council in the United Nations, as well as the Sustainable Development Goals, which became a wonderful rhetoric, figure of rhetoric, but they are left aside. So I think that the mood will be very adverse, and the problem will be very difficult. Lastly, because my time is over, I'm following my dear friend Mario. Lastly, there is the US-China relation. The new DG was praised by both sides, but how are they going to support her when she starts to hurt? Because there will be pain. Any change brings forward pain. So how is she going to deliver? How is she going to move according to the US and Chinese interests? Are they going to get together as at first view or up to now? Well, she was inaugurated, she took office on March the 1st. So her mandate is 8 years or 9, or that is 8 days or 9 days old. But when the tough gets tougher, and the going gets tough, 3-6 months afterwards, she has a ministerial by the end of the year. She has to deliver something. How will the US and China align themselves? And if they split, how will the other middle powers associate? Are they going to create a third power, as it happened with the G20 on the agricultural negotiations, or not? So this is another unknown that our dear Madam Okonjo Iweala will have to face. So my brief conclusion, because I'm running already to 5 minutes over my time, is that Madam Okonjo Iweala has a 4-year mandate. I'm afraid that during the first 2 years, not much will happen. I wish her the best of all lucks, but she will, if she's really lucky, she'll manage to go on with the organization. She'll manage to keep some decency and open trade, but not much will happen. She will be concerned with the organization of the ministerial by the end of the year. She said she's announced that maybe she'll change her mind. She announced already that she wants to address fisheries subsidized, which I think is a very tough subject, and the digital. So during the first 2 years, I don't expect much. In the second half of her mandate, if she's lucky, maybe she will be able to implement fundamental changes, for instance, in the understanding on dispute settlement and the correlated appellate body, and maybe address new ideas regarding enterprises and how to reconcile the idea of free trade with the concern for keeping and creating more employment than labor. So I'm not exactly pessimist, but I'm not optimist. I think that unfortunately not much is going to happen in the next 2 years for sure, and maybe in the next 4 years. And if this is the case, unfortunately, I think the WTO will continue to be in the intensive care unit. Very unfortunately. Okay, thank you. This was my message. Let me profit to announce that all those who have questions or comments, we should address them to Jadi, because she's going to, at the end of the presentations, going to give us the list of the questions. We'll be most glad to answer. And now I pass the floor immediately to our friend from Barcelona, Edward Soler. Please, Edward.
Thank you, Renato. So, and thank you all, and to the subject, to the Vargas, for the organization. So let me first explain why I was kind of reluctant to comment on geopolitics of the vaccine, and topic myself and also the members at CIDOP are working on. It's first because, as Renato said, the research also needs still to be completed, and there are some blind spots when it comes to data. But secondly, also because it's kind of commenting about the film, when you have only seen 30 minutes, because we are still at the very beginning or in one of the phases of the geopolitics of the vaccine, and the patterns of cooperation and conflict also may change drastically in the middle of the film or at the very end. One of the, for instance, if you look at the European Union, how it addresses the issue of vaccine and foreign policy, certainly there will be a big difference when a part of its own population will be vaccinated. And then we may see also how the European Union may also incorporate the vaccines as part of its foreign policy toolbox, as other countries are already doing. But certainly we are not there yet. So that was kind of the reason, but at the same time, Renato Flores is very persuasive, and I was persuaded. And also, I really want to listen from you also about what you have to say about the kind of ideas that we have already identified. First thing, when we talk about the geopolitics of the vaccine, most of the things that you are going to read and listen to fall into the classical material geopolitics, emphasizing competition over cooperation. But it is also important to explain that there is also a particular component of the cooperative nature of geopolitics. And here, on the one hand, it's global geopolitics and the idea of how globally we are addressing a global challenge. And there have been many examples of it, starting with cooperation among scientists all over the world. So it's not only about competition, it's also about the geopolitics of cooperation, or how neighboring countries may be forced to cooperate because of the transnational, transborder nature of the virus. If mobility is to be recovered, which it's needed in many economies, neighboring economies, then also what you have is that classical geopolitics put all the emphasis on the states. And here again, when we look at the geopolitics of the vaccine, we need to incorporate not only the private sector, obviously, but also the philanthropics, which have become a key player in for instance, in the global alliance on vaccination. And again, it's not only about interests, so it's not only about material geopolitics, but it's also about status, prestige, and reputation. So my goal, and in the framework of this Jean Monnet Network, will be to try to look at how all these more conceptual debates are translated into the Atlantic space, and also about what does this dynamics in the Atlantic space tell us about broader dynamics, and then to discuss also about the embeddedness also of the Atlantic space in this broader global dynamics. And here the first thing to also to link with Mariotello's presentation and also to Renato's opening remarks is that we see in a more multipolar world, where we have several, very few key players, we are starting to see, if we look at the geopolitics of the vaccine, how we also see a more multipolar Atlantic, with few actors that count when it comes to the production and distribution of the vaccine. Obviously the West, but then China, Russia, and in Russia's also vaccine diplomacy, you see also how central Latin America is, and more recently India, who started, still in the phase 3 of its own vaccine, but already producing AstraZeneca, mainly distributing and donating in the countries of its vicinity, in the Indian Ocean, but growingly also, and in the space we are working on, increasingly working with the small island countries of the Pacific, where India is distributing a small amount of vaccine, but which has a big impact for those small countries like Saint Lucia or Jamaica or others. Then, so yes, a multipolar world and a multipolar Atlantic space when we see which actors are using or are able to introduce vaccines as part of its foreign policy toolbox. Then we see on one stream of the cooperation in the Atlantic space, which is the transatlantic relation, classical transatlantic relation between the US and the European Union. And now we may need to incorporate Brexit, so the UK. We've seen also in this relation how during the past period, so with Trump, health cooperation was not exemplary, but now we may see, and this has little to do with the pandemic and more to do with the political changes in the US, how this area may become an area for cooperation between the US and the EU and perhaps London as well, but interestingly channeled towards the multilateral frameworks. So again, this has to do about the US return to the World Health Organization, but also its participation in the COVAX system. So that will be also an interesting stream to be followed. But these are very recent decisions to see to what extent this issue is being incorporated in the classical North transatlantic debate or dialogue. Third, we will need to look at the global South. I look at the pandemic and particularly at this post-pandemic or the different speeds in the recovery after the pandemic, very much linked to vaccination, as an opportunity, or in any way as triggering a new attempt to rethink what does the global South means and how the countries from the global South should cooperate among themselves, and also in multilateral frameworks such as the World Trade Organization. And here we've seen some interesting developments. India and South Africa on the lead when it came to also trying to gather countries from the global South to ask also for a temporary lift of the intellectual property rights on the vaccines. But we have seen also, for instance, how in Latin America not all the countries adhered to that position. So that will be very interesting. Also, it's I agree, but asking our Latin American partners also to comment on this. The new move by Mexico also to try to kind of lead and be the portfolio of vaccines and property rights. I don't know if you can listen to me because it got frozen for a moment. I hope I'm okay. Then, so that's an aspect that we'll have to look at, global South relations, and finally interregional. And we will need to look at how the issue of the vaccines is incorporated in the European Union CELAC. Sorry for that, Renata. I think there was a connection problem. I'm back. Can you hear me well? Okay, sorry. So as I was saying, we see this more global South relationship, and we'll see which kind of leaderships emerge, and whether there is also, this is part of the relation between also Latin America and Africa, so the Southern transatlantic relation, and finally, more if you want, the diagonal relations. We have to look an horizontal and vertical as well, we'll have to look at the extent to which COVID and the vaccine is incorporated in interregional agendas. So that has to do also with some summits that were postponed, like EU-Africa, summits that are already scheduled, like the Ibero-American summit to take place in Andorra in April, we'll see. And also in perhaps the EU-CELAC summit, we'll see whether in 2021 or later. My impression, in light of what I was saying before, is that there is a risk, if we want to call it that way, of these interregional platforms to become the occasion also where differences among a global north and global south approaches to this issue of vaccination may be staged. So certainly it can be an area for cooperation when it comes to interregional cooperation, but it can also be an area of friction. And I'll finish here. Thank you, Renato. And apologies for the connection.
Please, no, thank you very much, Dr. Soler. That was exactly what I was looking for, just to raise the theme on the vaccine issue, which I think is very important, and I think you did an excellent job. Thank you very much. Well, without further ado, we move now to the northwestern coast of Africa, and I have the pleasure to pass the word to Dr. Ait Ali. Hope to have pronounced correctly, my friend. Is it correct?
Yes, it's correct. It's correct.
So I pass the word to Dr. Ait Ali from our brother institution, the Policy Center for the New South. Dr. Ait Ali, please.
So first of all, thank you so much for inviting me and for sharing your thoughts on this very interesting project. And we hope we can contribute to this very nice and interesting network. So here at the Policy Center, we'll try to tackle merely the trades issue here from a perspective of a country integrated with such a big markets, notably the European one, in light of this ongoing pandemic. So as you know here, in terms of countries' responses to this unprecedented economic and health crisis, countries have been quite innovative and agile in designing the right response to alleviate the economic and social impacts. So some policies have successed, and I mean by that merely fiscal, monetary and macroprudential policies, but others have unintentionally caused damage to the global economy, and I'm referring here to the defensive trade policies. So as you know, trade policy responses have heavily disrupted trade and supply chains due to some ad hoc export restrictions and cultural measures, especially in the early stages of the crisis. So leaving behind some fragile and vulnerable countries who are still now witnessing some of the impacts. And those responses come against the country's trade commitments with their trading partners, and highlighted, by the way, the limitation of the existing trade agreement as well as the multilateral trade principle. This is something that you, Mr. Flores, have touched on during your presentation. I believe that we have seen that even among European countries, one of the most integrated regions, some countries were left behind in the early stages of the crisis, and the export controls have surged all over the world, especially for medical equipments and medicines among a large share of developing and developed countries. We have also witnessed some restrictions over food products, but not as widespread. So we have seen that this looks like this immunity reaction of the body. Whenever there is a threat, the first thing that we do is we raise walls. It can be understood, but I think we should work on this reaction in the next phases in order to cope with this kind of behavior, to find the right way to the solution. The new wave, I would say, of this defensive policies relates to vaccine. This is what Mr. Eduardo have talked about. So how can we deal with this general threats toward trade protectionism and explicit trade controls that goes against multilateral commitments? The first thing thinking about is that within this thrust to, I would call, trade autarky that some countries have been arguing for, we have realized that trade and international cooperation have actually softened the impact of the pandemic over companies, and every citizen of this globe actually feel it. With all the issues facing now, this equitable and fair access to vaccine, we have to recall that without international cooperations, we don't think that vaccines could be available in such a record time. So research and development advances actually among international scientists have indeed outpaced and overtaken the production, the manufacturing capacity. So the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine is a German-American product. The AstraZeneca vaccine also is a Swedish and a British product, and also the new Johnson & Johnson vaccine is a kind of collaboration between Belgium and the United States. So we see actually to what extent international cooperation have been very good for the common good of people. And right now also, I believe the physical production is widespread all over the world. We see production in China and in India and in European countries and American countries. So trade is a part of the solution, not actually the part of the problem. So we don't actually believe, and this is the message that we should share with our policymakers, that raising walls instead of laying bridges would be the right response in the time of the pandemic. And to make sure we are heading to this direction, an open and rule-based world trade system, as you said, Mr. Flores, is the right response to set the recovery and to find this balance, as you really well said it, between the fair trade, which is actually an intermediate good to the creation of employment. So we should keep in mind that employment creation is the final target, not actually the intermediate one. So and we believe here that this temporary global protectionism, fueled for sure by some more fundamental and structural factors, is taking a new dimension with this classic, what we call classic import substitution strategy. And this would be translated in a more fully fledged industrial policy in every country. And we feel it here in Morocco and in some countries surrounding Europe, because policymakers, this discourse right now is really infected with this jargon to bring back manufacturing, to restore activities, and to this, what we call the reshoring. So the paper that we're trying to, on the project that we are trying to contribute to, in my sense, we tackle this issue of bringing back manufacturing, bringing back reshoring activities in European countries and also in countries surrounding Europe. And we believe actually that this belief is overstated, and this might be a losing bet for 3 or 4 main reasons in my sense. So first of all, is that countries actually are betting on the fact that global value chains would be reorganized in regional dimension and leaving away, for example, Asian countries such as China. So, but as you know, these multinational companies doing this kind of fragmentation are not merely serving only the European countries, they're also serving the Chinese local market. The Chinese local market is getting bigger, it is increasing. This is what Mr. Marius said on this shift between West and East. So the next driver of growth will be China, will be Asia. So I don't believe this, we don't believe actually that these multinational companies will just leave China for this and go back to Europe. So we don't believe that these countries will bite to this policymakers' discourse and just to reallocate their activity overnight. The second reason we believe in that this might not succeed, in fact, is that there is kind of struggle between multinational companies and policymakers, and these international companies are fragmenting the supply chain for costs optimizing objectives. So, and the fact of bringing this activity would be very costly. So the first one that would pay for this price is actually us, the final consumers. And I don't think we believe that we are ready to do so, let our well-being fall down. unless states actually compensate these companies for this reindustrialization. But still, at the end, this will be very costly, and public finances, as you said, in Europe or in countries are really bearing the cost of the crisis. We see that fiscal deficits are really huge. So increasing the weight on the public finances through giving these incentives to the companies will make things worse. So at the end, we believe that bidding on this strategy might not give the right results. And the first data that's coming out of China and Europe shows actually that this reallocation is not taking place. So we believe that this our contribution would be to the project from a perspective of a middle-income country, of a country working closely with Europe, of a country that have been developing a kind of industrial policy that sets import substitution as one of this main strategy to bring back activity manufacturing, as we at the Morocco also are witnessing a kind of premature deindustrialization. And I stop here, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ait Ali. It's nice to hear a positive view. So I think your intervention has been very nice because it gives a positive, now very balanced view. And we are looking forward to see the conclusions and the developments of your nice project. Thank you very much for your presentation. And now I pass the word to our old friend. And as I said, he's a member of honor in the network, Professor Mark Aspinall. Please, Mark.
Thank you very much, Renato. And colleagues, I really appreciate your comments. Very, very interesting. And welcome to the audience. I'll just take probably about 5 minutes here because I know time is running out. We've been all talking and we want to hear, I know there's some questions coming in from the audience. We want to hear from others. So let me just mention 2 or 3 things quickly. I benefited greatly from the comments of Mario, of Renato, of Edward, and Abdelaziz. Thank you very much for those. The focus has been so far on broad, strategic, multilateral, bilateral, global organizations that affect the Atlantic community, the Atlantic Basin, also on some of the policy themes and issues like labor and trade and vaccines and national reactions. Let me start because I'm going to focus a little bit on the environment at the end, but start by saying that China as a key actor here now in the Atlantic needs to be thought about as deeply as possible. Now, China featured in some of the suggested comments on this panel as well. China is both focused domestically and it's focused strategically internationally. In the past few days, the National People's Congress has spoken, including President Xi Jinping, about the need to promote domestic consumption. It has showcased its authoritarian model as a better way of dealing with the pandemic quickly, shutting it down, and enabled China to recover and to project growth in the coming months and in the next year much more quickly than in the West. It's also unfortunately cracking down on opposition in Hong Kong, designing a new law to make democratic opposition much more difficult there. So domestically, it has those. It's claimed to be much more green in its energy use than ever before, and to reduce dependence on external actors for energy and for technology. Xi Jinping has also talked about decline and division in the West, and here I think he's absolutely right. The nationalist and populist models of a number of Western states, of Atlantic partners, has really undermined not simply the alliances, but the standards and the rule-based systems on which these are based. And really put pressure on the rule-based system of standards that underpins the World Trade Organization, the alliance system in the Atlantic, and other organizations, including regional ones. And although we have a new president in the United States, this threat has not gone away. So China has been able to exploit these divisions in the West. Speaking of decline, well, decline may be premature, but division certainly is correct. That plus the pandemic has enabled China to reach out through it may be overhyped, but it's vaccine diplomacy in Latin America, its Belt and Road Initiative in Latin America, and infrastructure projects in Latin America, and of course, it's been buying in increasing volumes primary products from Latin America for about 20 years now, since prices rose dramatically. It's been a long time. Where has the West been in this? Well, in certain cases, signing agreements like the Comprehensive Agreement on Investments and others. Before that, of course, the European Union had a strategic partnership and has played and considered how to deal with China for a very long time. It suits China, doesn't it? It does suit China to pick apart the West, and just like Nixon did with the Soviet Union in early 1970s by increasing friendship and alliance with China. And those times, China now with the European Union helps to undermine the EU North American alliance and the strength of that alliance. So this is part of the challenges that we face in the Atlantic, and I think it's extremely important. But I would take this one step further. One of the things that we haven't spoken about, and I'm going to connect all three themes of this project: the economic flows theme, the human security theme, and also the environmental one, by talking about a new agreement in Latin America that's set to come into force with 12 partners in April, in 1 month, and that's called the Escazú Accord, which is inspired not simply by the Rio Agreement in 1992, but more recently the Aarhus Convention, I think of 2001, which is to make real the participation of citizens in the making of decisions about environment, about massive projects, which are often, well, not so much China, but for example, Canadian extractive companies, European extractive companies in Latin America, which are growing rapidly. And now it's not simply foreign investment in Latin America, which is driving these mega projects, but also national governments who are investing in infrastructure projects and tourist developments and others. Citizens have been left behind. Local communities have been damaged by these mega projects. They've been left out of the discussion. And the Escazú Agreement is an effort finally to bring that to an end, to draw in local communities helped by powerful NGOs in Latin America and beyond, to provide them with information about mega projects that affect their communities, their livelihoods, their health, their way of life, to enable them to participate in environmental decision makings and to enable them to gain access to justice where they have a serious dispute at stake. It also acts to protect environmental defenders. And there are other elements to it to guarantee citizen participation, which I think is extremely important. This links, and this is worth a paper in its own right, links the Aarhus Convention to Latin America. It was a learning experience drawing from Aarhus and the European experience on citizen rights. And it is an answer to unfettered investments and development without regard to citizen rights, which I think needs to be taken a lot more seriously. And I fear even the Escazú Accord, as good as it is not going to be enough without strengthened domestic capacities to draw citizens into the discussion about development and particularly about inward investment. Now, with that, I will stop so that we have at least a few minutes. Thank you very much for the opportunity. So we have at least a few minutes for other questions.
Thank you very much, Mark. You brought newer ideas, so we have plenty of subjects to discuss. Could you maybe try one or two questions? Where are the questions, Jadi? Could you send us the questions? Hello. Could I have the questions, please? Questions. First question is to Mario, but we can also answer. Mario, are you there? The question is the following. I'll read the question.
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, wonderful, Mario. Is the EU's investment agreement with China primarily a diplomatic opportunity? And how does the pandemic influences this agreement? Would you like to say a few words, and then we can try to do one or more?
I believe that there are on both sides two motivations. One is really to regulate the investments. That is extremely important. And by a comprehensive approach, including all the dimensions of investment, labor, environment, market access, public procurement, and so on. This was the first. The second one, both the leadership are aware about the extremely conflictual period of our multipolar world, which is becoming bifurcated, is becoming bipolarized. Don't underestimate the strong tendency toward the bifurcation between the United States and China. Is a strong interest of Brazil, of South America, of Europe to contain this bifurcation, because we will be the victims of a dramatic bifurcation coming back to the Cold War. This is the geopolitical motivation of Europe. Regarding China, of course, China tries to divide Europe from United States, no doubt about that. But the European Union alliance with United States is very old, since 1949. It depends on United States to revive the alliance. They have cut the TTIP negotiation. They pretend Europe to spend more money in defense, whereas they don't guarantee a two pillars alliance. They still consider Europe as a junior partner who has to ask for permission for dealing with China, whereas they deal with China. They had even Donald Trump did sign an arrangement with China in January 2020, the first phase arrangement. So all the democracies signed the arrangement with China: Australia, Japan, Korea, Switzerland. UK would like to sign. I think Brazil, Bolsonaro visited China to deepen the relationship. So we cannot ask the permission to United States to deal with China. That is unacceptable. It's really the role of junior partner of the 50s. We are not coming back to the 50s.
Thank you, Mario. Mark, would you like to say something on this or no?
Not particularly on this, Renato, but there were two other questions that I could tackle really quickly, if that's okay.
Okay, because okay, go on.
Leonardo asks, will the pandemic impact global value chains and induce countries to reduce their exposure to the international trade to tackle their vulnerabilities? Well, this is exactly what the trade advisors to Trump wanted to do. I think that what's going to happen, though, is that companies will try to diversify. They may withdraw some of their production into international markets in order to reduce their exposure, but also potentially diversify their suppliers so that they have more than one set of potential supplies coming in, for example, and also work better to plan For example, in the U.S.-Mexico context, this is one of the things, and plan and coordinate changes to potential changes to value chains and to movements of supplies, given pandemics potentially closing down borders. The other question was about main differences between the EU and the United States and the complex relationship with China and the attempt to curb it. This is a really interesting question, and I think in a way China's, as I was saying, trying to divide the two in a way, and Europe is in a way got more incentive to agree to this. Why? Because it's got a bunch of countries all vying for an economic relationship, because it isn't a single unit like the United States. And the comprehensive agreement on investment is particularly beneficial to France and Germany at the expense of some of the other European countries. So there is still a competitive logic at work within the European Union that makes them more inclined to go that way. Whereas, and also the other thing is that the US is, at least on paper, is more, I think, more inclined to try to support universal standards in trade and other kinds of economic agreement.
Thank you very much, Mark.
May I say a point? I like it very much, the comment by Mark. Very much, particularly regarding the environmental cooperation with China. Regarding the comprehensive arrangement on investments, there is a narrative in some part of the international press. According to this narrative, only the German companies will benefit of this arrangement. I'm completely against this narrative, because I remember that the European Union is a multilateral organization. Every negotiation is approved by the Council, where we have 27 ministers, and they voted unanimously in favor of this arrangement. I don't know why they should vote in case only Germany benefits of this, and they will be loser in these arrangements.
Okay.
It's a win-win arrangement. It's not at the expenses of some countries.
Okay. Thank you, Mario.
Everybody can make money with China.
Okay, that's true. Well, we are actually, our time is over, but I will advance. I don't like to do this, but I'll give 5 extra minutes, not more than that. And I'll state one question, being a very fair and unbiased coordinator. I will pick up the question by our friend Ana Yuso, and I will start to answer, but I think I would like to hear also the others on this, because it's a question that touches nearly all the speakers. Ana asks, do you think that regulatory arrangements of the EU with China and with Mercosur can facilitate convergence in the WTO, or they will harden or difficult the negotiations with the United States? I have a very short answer. In principle, yes. If the EU manages to close, because as Mario said, the Mercosur-EU agreement is very preliminary still, and there is a lot of opposition. I myself, I don't know what's going to be the outcome. I'm 50-50. But if the EU fixes agreements with Mercosur and China, this may be the first seed of an alliance regarding changes in the WTO. Without broad alliances, there will be impossible to transform the WTO. So this is a nice idea. This may be a way to do, but very preliminary. I'm not very optimistic, but I like the idea. I think the point is that without broad alliances, not China by itself, nor the US by itself will be able to provoke changes in the WTO. So you need broader alliance. The second part, will this harden the negotiations with US? I don't know. I still am unable to analyze exactly the personality and the Biden's administration. Maybe yes, maybe no. I feel unable to answer the second part. This may or not, the US may be more enlightened and regard the WTO, there might be some cooperation. So second part, I don't know. The floor is open. We still have 3 minutes. Who wants to say something?
I totally agree with you. I
Thank
totally
you.
agree with you. Is it possible to create a variable coalitions?
Yes.
Variable
One for
coalition
WTO, another
to
for
reform
WTO.
multilateral networks. One of
Yes.
the variable coalition is regarding WTO. I completely agree with you, and I would like just to add that the same kind of regulatory arrangement has been set in 2018 with Japan,
Yes,
and
yes,
in 2017 with Canada,
yeah,
and with other part of the world. So is a possible bridge between what is called bilateral. I prefer interregional, but
good.
it's a matter of disciplines, and multilateral reform. I agree that the African lady is weak by leading the WTO, but let's hope keep the door open to
Yes,
a convergence. To some
yes,
extent, even the United States may be one of the supporter of the regulation of subsidized and state enterprise. Or this is
truly.
in IPR. This is also important dialogue between us and the United States. Also between Brazil and the United States about
Yes,
that.
truly. Thank you. Edward,
Yes,
Abdelaziz, yes, please. You want to
I
add
wanted to
something? We have
comment
2 minutes.
on I wanted to comment on Lisa's question that we have on the chat also about the pandemic being a transatlantic problem, and then why there is no more concern about the vaccination of neighbors. And here I wanted to highlight an aspect, which is that it depends very much on the porosity of borders, on the importance of tourism in different countries, and also about the intensity and depth of people-to-people contacts, family relations, migration, and so on. And when you factor in all those elements, you can easily then identify countries that may be more open to international cooperation. These would be those that are more exposed also in this level of mobility with the rest of the world. This also gives a new meaning to neighborhood relations in the Atlantic or elsewhere. Speaking of the country I am from Spain, you can then see why among all the countries in Europe, probably Spain is one of those that care more about the issue of vaccination in Latin America. That has to do with people-to-people relations in the two sides of the Atlantic, or also when it comes to Africa because of geographic proximity and the porosity of borders with Morocco.
Thank you very much, Edward. Abdelaziz, final comment, 1 minute final comment.
No really comments on this. Just to add on what Mr. Mark said, and I totally agree with him on the fact that this pandemic might impact the global value chains in terms of diversification of suppliers, but I don't believe that it would change completely the face and the way things are organized in the world. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, thank you all. It's been a great pleasure. I think that everybody learned a lot. Thank you very much. So I close the session, and I remind you that we reconvene at 12:20 GMT-3, which means 3:30 in GMT time. Thank you very much. Thank you.